Welcome back to Just Keep Parenting, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. This is a place where we can just be reminded of good parenting, good teaching strategies, um, and how to get out of our brainstem and into our thinking brain when the kids are in their brainstem. Right? The other night I was on vacation, and this little 2-year-old, bless his little heart, was just throwing a fit, a Mimi fit, down on the ground, arms flailing. And I just looked at him and I said, "Sweetie, it is so hard to be two and be tired, isn't it?" And he just looked at me. I said, "I know, it's just hard to be two." I said, "I bet you are so tired right now." Anyway, it didn't stop it, but I was practicing my having empathy, right, for the situation, that power of acceptance, to be able to accept it as it is right now. We can't sit here and be embarrassed. We can't sit here and wish it was something else. It is as it is, right? And so how can we help ourselves move beyond that and help the child move beyond that, right? So last week we talked about the types of consequences, right? The punitive, the permissive, and stopping that blame game, right? Because as soon as somebody kind of affronts us, right, we bring up that defense, right? And we start to blame somebody else. And so we're going to continue that. Last week we talked about the acronym, right? That when the blame game is used, right, we can use that acronym that is called GAMES to help us work through that. So this week we're going to talk about another acronym. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, but this week we're going to talk a little bit more about problem solving as a consequence, right? Because we really have been consequenced out as children, as adults, right? We all know that poor choices create conflicts and problems, right? In children, in our own life as adults, right? And so as we think about the consequences of problems, that naturally lets us think about problem solving, right? So many of us are trained to think about punishment, right? Or the child's loss. You're going to lose this, you're going to lose this privilege, or we're going to punish you, right? When when a consequence is initiated, right? We forget to think in terms of solutions, right? How can we solve this problem, right? We forget to think in terms of teaching. What does this child not know yet? What haven't I taught them yet, right? So as we impose consequences, then we can use empathy instead of lectures, is what I was trying to do to the 2-year-old, right? I also was talking to a friend last week, and we were talking about parenting and how she's parented, and we were talking about relationships, right? How do we keep that relationship strong? She said one of the things that she's tried not to do is ever should on her kids, right? You should have done this, you should have done that, I told you so, right? And she said, I've had to work really hard not to should on them, because naturally they're already typically feeling bad, right? And when I should on them, then it creates problems in our relationships. And I've been thinking a lot about that and how I should on people sometimes, just even my friends, right? Well, you should have done this. And I really am grateful that I'm starting to, I say, oh, I'm so sorry I just did that to you, right? In the moment, so that I can get better at that. So even at my age, at 58, I'm still learning, I'm still growing on how to make relationships work, right? So when we help children by being actively engaged in their own problem solvings, right, then we can have peaceful words, we can have peaceful homes, right? It really is a reality if we can help them become actively engaged in their own problem solving. Quite often in the classroom, when a problem happens, like if something falls, like they're building in the block center and something falls, I will say to him, "Oh, it looks like we have a problem to solve." And they're like, but, and I'm like, okay, so let's figure this out, right? So we've got a problem here. And so what do you think was the cause of the problem? What made it fall? Well, it just didn't work very well. Okay, so what are we going to do? How can we make the foundation bigger or stronger, right? What can we do to make it stronger? Because the problem is you've got the big pieces at the top and the little pieces at the bottom, right? So as we help them work through that, then they can be actively engaged in problem solving, right? So as we think about another acronym, one of the things that, the last one was games, right? As we help them sort through the blaming game. But this one is about bringing peace, right? Bringing peace to our words, bringing peace to our homes. And so the first one is P. We discern who owns the problem, right? We've got a problem. Where does the problem lie, right? Who owns it, right? And many times I was talking to my sister on the phone today, and we had a little situation with a service group that I work with, and somebody had said, I know you checked with us, but we can't do it this week. We can't do it next month. And rather than taking it on, right, it wasn't my problem to own. So these are things that we can do even with our own selves and not with just children. But I said to my sister, this is what I'm going to do. And she said, oh, thank you for not owning that problem, right? Because it really is their problem to own, and I have to help them figure that out. So I texted them back and said, you can do this or this, right? This is what's been done in the past, but this isn't mine to fix. This isn't mine to own. This isn't mine to change, right? So I gave them the tools, right? Sometimes we talk about teaching correct principles and letting them govern themselves, right? And that's what I like to think that parenting and teaching is about, is teaching those correct principles and then letting them govern themselves, right? So discern who owns the problem, right? It's not mine to own, but as parents and teachers, sometimes it's that permissiveness, right? It's that I want to save them, right? When in reality, no, this is the problem. In the book, there's a little boy, Micah, and he didn't get ready for school. So he's in his pajamas, right? And I love when his mother says, let me find it here. She said, you seem to be having a problem, right? And in this book, Dr. Bailey, she talks a lot about how we take that problem. Oh, this sounds like a problem. You seem to be having a problem, right? If your child is having a problem getting dressed in the morning, step one might look like this. Micah, you seem to be having a problem this morning. You're not dressed and the car is leaving in 5 minutes, right? So there again, it's going back to the rule of 3 that we've talked about before, right? So what's the problem, right? And so this is a problem. You seem to be having the problem. The car is leaving in 5 minutes and you're not dressed, right? So she's discerned who has the problem. The E is offer empathy, right, to the child who's made the poor choice. So continuing with this idea of not getting dressed, she said to Micah, and I think this is important too, when we inform children that they have a problem, and it's just like us, right, when we're informed we have a problem, our first tendency is to blame others and deflect responsibility, right? This is not disrespect. I think that's important for us to recognize. It's not disrespect. What it is, it's normal to a potential threat. It's a normal reaction to a potential threat, right? So it's a little bit of that brainstem. We're going right back there to that fight or flight idea. When we perceive ourselves to be threatened in any way, our brains shift into defense mode, right? We then attempt to transfer the responsibility of a poor choice to something outside of ourselves, right? He started it. If you love me, you wouldn't make me go, right? Those types of things. So, and a lot of times young children, they don't have the words, the vocabulary, right, to blame others. So they'll just run and scream and stomp and throw fits. That's what we see happening, right? So in this situation above, Micah ignores his mother and her comment, which is another typical way, right, to deflect that responsibility. Now it's time to leave the house. He's still in his pajamas. Mom, ready to leave, says, oh, Micah, this could be upsetting. It's time for you to go and you're not dressed. Micah looks up and is surprised to see Mom with her coat and keys. Micah begins to scream, I hate you. I'm not going to school. I'm not dressed. I want Daddy. Mom takes a deep breath, uses that power of acceptance, right? I can't change it. The moment is as it is, to calm herself. And then she says, you seem really angry. It's hard to think of going to school in your pajamas. That's the empathy, right? Mom continues to let Micah know the problem still belongs to Micah, right? Had she lost the self-control, right, she would have made the problem hers by screaming, lecturing, or issuing threats. So the next one is A, ask. Ask the child to think, what do you think you're going to do, right? How are you going to solve this problem? We say that all the time with the kids in the lab school. How are we going to solve this problem? Because it's a problem. Everybody's talking at the same time. How are we going to solve this? And the story only has 2 ears, right? I only have 2 eyes. And everybody keeps talking at the same time, right? I am always amazed at their abilities to say, well, we have to raise our hands. Duh, right? That's the inside of me that's like, duh, we've talked about this before, right? But when they come up with it, when they problem solve, they're better at interacting, at taking that on, right? So what do you think you're going to do? So in Micah, right, in that situation, she says, what are you going to do, Micah? How are you going to solve your problem, right? And then the C, the PEAC, is offer choices and suggestions, right? Often children, especially young ones, right, have not developed a repertoire of solutions to problems. They don't know that yet. So when asked to identify one, they simply respond, I don't know. And to this we say, it's not hard to know. Are you interested in some idea? It's hard to know. It's hard not to know. Are you interested in some ideas? I can help you with that, right? So would you like some ideas of what other children have tried, right? And so helping them, it conjures up a sense of willingness within children, right? Rather than lecturing them, helping them to be actively engaged in that problem solving, right? And so we have to be willing to change, right? Willingness is critical to that change, else it's not going to happen. So we ask for it, right? So in this situation, Mom says, you could put your clothes in a bag to take to school or go to school in your pajamas. Which would be better for you? Micah starts to scream, I hate you, and begins to throw things. Mom offers empathy again, so she has to backtrack a little bit. You're really upset. It is scary to think of going to school in your pajamas. Do you want to put your clothes in a bag to put on in the car, or do you want to go to school in your pajamas, right? So there's that A, right? Ask the child, offer suggestions for the C, and then E, encourage a child to come up with his own solution, right? So we end the interaction, right, by encouraging the child. Sometimes I'll have children that won't choose at this point, and I will say to them, you know what, I can tell that you're having a hard time making a choice, and we've talked about lots of different options that you can do. So I'm going to go and check on somebody else over at the end of the classroom, and then I'll be back to check on you to see what you've come up with. So sometimes they just need a little bit of time, right? In this situation, there wasn't a lot of time. Mom was leaving. It was time to go. He needed to put on his clothes. So as we ask them to problem solve, right, as we problem solve with them, it asks the children to think and reflect on their choices, right? It demands that they accept responsibility. Sadly, too many of us associate responsibility with admitting an error or confessing to the crime, so to speak. How often have you heard, if you're honest and take the responsibility, it will be better for you, right? Responsibility does not come from accepting blame and punishment for one's actions. It comes from resisting the temptation to blame others and then seeking solutions instead of problem solving. And then she talks about a situation as an adult that she had. It seemed like she was always forgetting meetings. And I love how she says in here, I recently had a luncheon appointment with some leaders in education to discuss a new program. I was busily working at my computer when the phone rang. As soon as I heard the voice on the other end of the line, I knew I'd missed the meeting. Immediately, my inner voice began ranting. Becky, you should know better. You've let the children down who would have benefited from this program. You are disorganized and rude. With this voice bombarding me from within, I was apologizing in torrents to the woman on the phone. After hanging up, I finally silenced the battering voices in my head by empathizing with myself. So see, she's even doing it to herself. I thought, I get so absorbed that I lost track of time and missed the meeting. I let a lot of people down. In the future, she's accepting this responsibility. I will keep my date book open on the floor beside my chair and will set an alarm clock too. I made a mistake. I can change this behavior. All is well. Breathe deeply. I will focus on ways to change. And then she goes through and she talks about how that moment kind of defined the rest of her She still is late to some of the meetings, but she's never forgotten a meeting since then, right? And so it's that change that we talk about. And so it's brought peace to her. It's brought peace to her life, her business, right? And so I think as we have that, we calm that inner CD, right? We calm that inner voice by accepting the responsibility. This was my fault, right? But what am I going to do to change it? How am I going to problem solve through this? So we saw it through her eyes, and then we get to do it with children and also with us. And I love the very ending of this. She says, I find that the more I practice these techniques with myself, the more natural they feel when I use them with children. Right? And that's what her whole premise of the book is. We have to calm ourselves. We have to do it to ourselves first, and then we can help with children. So that's our goal this week, folks, to have a little more peace in our family, in our lives, in our classrooms, within ourselves, as we figure out how to PEACE, right? As we problem solve and help others to be actively involved in that problem solving, or maybe it is helping ourselves to be actively involved in that problem solving. So go us, go team, just keep swimming, and we'll see you back here next week. Thanks for joining.